Welcome to today's talk session. My name is Deidre Moss, and I'm the host of Can We Talk? I'm an educator, motivator, and a talk connoisseur. As we recognize April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, our session today will focus on toxic relationships. We are still in this is still, the month of April. We recognize Sexual Assault Month, and we want to talk about this and other related topics. So today we welcome Cindy Godet to help us dissect this topic. So at this time, I will pass the virtual mic to her to have her introduce herself.
Hi, Deidre. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Cindy Godet. I am a sexual assault advocate as well as an activist, and I run the support group Silent No More Bahamas on Facebook. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Godet. I'm so excited to have you here today. But before we begin, if you just joined us, like and share this video. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel using the links that are provided on our page. We need your support so we can continue these talks. So with that, we're gonna get into our session. And so I just want to touch a little bit about your background. I know you said you're an activist and you're involved in some groups, but can you tell us just a little bit more about yourself for those who may not be so familiar with you?
Sure. Well, I am a child sexual abuse survivor. I am a sexual assault survivor as an adult, and I am also a domestic violence survivor. And for the past 7 years, I have been an activist and just wanting to give back to the community, to give both men and women a safe space to share their truths, to inspire people to break their silence. As we know, silence is one of the most deadly things as it relates to something like this, because if we don't ever talk about it, we can't ever combat the issue and the epidemic of violence in our country. And so gender-based violence in particular in our country. And so that's what I do. That's my life's work. It's my passion. It's where my heart is. And I live for this, literally.
Yeah, so as you talk, I could see your passion. But firstly, I just want to apologize a little bit if you see me looking down. I'm going through, checking to see if we have any comments as yet. So you may see me glance down just a little bit. But as we talk about toxic relationships, that's a topic that we hear sometimes. That's a concept we hear sometimes. So what is your take on that? How would you define a toxic relationship?
Well, a toxic relationship is any sort of relationship where what is going on in the relationship is a detriment to your mental health, to your emotional health, to your physical health. Anything that does not allow you to progress and grow, that is a toxic relationship. Anything that's a detriment to you and your peace of mind is a toxic relationship. And of course, that looks different for different people depending on the nature of the relationship.
Thank you for sharing that. You want to say what it means to you? I know you said it looks different to different persons, but what does it mean to you?
Well, you have, for example, relationships where abuse is physical. You have relationships where abuse is verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual. And for me personally, I was in a very toxic relationship. My first marriage actually was very, very abusive. My first husband actually tried to kill me. So I'm grateful to be here and alive to be doing what I'm doing, but I have firsthand experience with a very toxic and dangerous relationship.
Thank you. And I'm so glad, you're sharing your story. I guess sometimes persons, they may kind of shy away from really talking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really talk about these things so much. I don't know if it's because there's stigma attached or maybe shame attached to talking about these things. But we need to kind of air these things out because it's a reality for so many people. And just hearing from someone like you talk about the fact that you were in that situation, you recognized that you were in that type of situation and you got out of it is enough for someone who may be going through that same situation, to kind of think about how they can, find themselves out of those type of situations that we sometimes find ourselves in. And I think as women, for me, is not something to shy away from because I feel as though anybody really can find themselves in that situation. I don't think you're really exempt from those situations. Yeah.
Abuse is no respect of persons. Anyone from any socioeconomic, ethnic, religious background, whatever have you, non-religious background, whatever have you, can be a victim of abuse and can find themselves at any time in a toxic relationship or with a toxic partner, or they may be the toxic partner to whomever they are with. And so for sure, it can happen to anybody, and it does across all walks of life.
Well, thank you for being open about it. Like I said, some persons, they're not really necessarily, they go through these experiences, but they're not necessarily open to sharing them and bringing them to the forefront. Like I said, because I don't know if it's because of shame or stigma, but it's not something that we openly talk about. Hey, I survived a toxic relationship. Hey, I survived an abusive relationship. It's not something that's openly discussed.
Well, that's because, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, that's fine.
But that's because typically we still see abuse in any form as a taboo subject. And there is this stigma of shame attached, and that's laid at the feet of those who were victims of the violence. And that shouldn't be the case. It should be laid at the feet of those who are the perpetrators of it. But more often than not, persons who are victims and survivors of abuse, when they start to break their silence and they start to speak out, they're often vilified. They're often blamed.
Wow, that is powerful. Please don't glaze over that. That's so very important. Could you repeat that again, please?
Sure. Very often when victims or survivors of abuse start to speak out, they are often vilified. They are often not believed. They are often blamed for their own abuses. And so what happens is this culture of silence starts to become fostered, and then that culture is stronger and stronger. We have such a strong victim blaming culture in our country. And so what it does is it makes persons not want to come forward, particularly women. When we go through abuses, we are expected to remain silent about it. And, God forbid we begin to really get the strength to say something, because then we're accused of seeking attention and validation from other people. And so we really have to do away with that mindset, because we cannot clean up our society. We can't fix this issue without talking about it. We have to have the conversation, and we have to keep having the conversation over and over and over again in every facet of life, in our schools, in our churches, in our homes, on social media, everywhere. We have to keep having this conversation. So I applaud you, Deidre, for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I applaud you for what you're doing. And being a woman, it's very, very important to talk about these issues. And so experience. Do you believe, well, you mentioned that, but why is it that you believe or how did you define yourself being in a toxic relationship?
Well, my first marriage was a bit unique in that there were absolutely no abuse signs at all before we got married. My ex-husband, unfortunately, was a master at just acting. You know, he deserved an Academy Award for sure. But while he and I were still in the dating phase, he was a perfect gentleman, never even so much as raised his voice at me. He was always just very calm and laid back. We never had an argument in our dating phase, not once. We got along great. We had great chemistry. And so there were really no signs. And then about a month after we got married is when he hit me for the first time. So not only was I now experiencing this domestic violence, but the shock of it all, because it was literally like I was with two completely different people. And then he also had began drinking heavily. And I did not see that either in our dating phase. He hardly drank at all while we were dating. And then escalated into drinking pretty much most of the day, every day. So, yeah. He was also very verbally abusive as well, very controlling. And so that's what I mean by unique, and that there were no signs prior to, because typically you will see signs. Like, for example, possessive and controlling behavior. Your partner may want to isolate you from your friends and family. They may start to invade your privacy, like going through your phones or your emails or your social media messages, that sort of thing. They may want to start to control the way you dress, where you go, that sort of thing. And so for 3 months, straight, my then husband was very physically abusive. I began going to work in the summer, and this is how my then colleague picked up that something was wrong, because it was summertime and I was coming to work with turtlenecks and scarves on. And she had asked me a couple of times, like, why are you dressing so warmly in the summer? And I couldn't come up with a reasonable excuse. I happen to be a pretty terrible liar. So she, after about the third or fourth time of her asking me and me just not really having a sensible explanation for it, she came out and asked me, and I had confided in her about what was going on. So in that 3-month period, I had a concussion, I had a dislocated shoulder. And shortly before he and I physically separated and he went back into the United States, he tried to kill me by attempting to throw me off of our balcony. We lived on the 4th floor of the building that we lived in at the time. And he tried to throw me off of the balcony and was unsuccessful. And of course, police was called. But the first time it happened, it didn't leave. Second time it happened, I didn't leave. Third time it happened, I didn't leave. I accepted his apology every single time. And unfortunately, I was blamed for what was going on. And so it was a very lonely time for me, because I was ashamed to admit what was happening to me. I was ashamed that I believed that I would be looked at as a problem or the problem, because I understand how our society is. And that's exactly what ended up happening. But I was able to get out, and like I said, he moved back to the United States. And so like shortly thereafter, I went through the process of filing for divorce.
And the interesting part of what you talked about is the fact that during your dating phase, you didn't necessarily had the overt signs.
Right.
You know,
right.
He wasn't, you said he didn't raise his voice. You know, you didn't see those signs.
Well, he wasn't controlling. There was nothing. Like over the years, I looked back, and there was Deidre. There was not one.
You don't think you missed something? It was nothing. You didn't.
No, I ended up after he moved back to the United States, I ended up finding out a lot about him that I had no idea of prior to us dating and prior to us getting married. And so it was no longer surprising to me that there were no signs in our dating phase, because he was a master manipulator and a master liar, like masterful liar. So, and of course I just didn't know that. And that's why there were no signs, because he made sure to, I guess, kind of be this ideal person. So yeah.
Wow. And that would take me to our next question. Mm-hmm. Signs. But you said there were there were no signs.
Right.
There were no signs.
So typically there are, like I said, some of the biggest ones being possessiveness, controlling behavior, dismissiveness of your feelings, constant critique, constant criticism, insults, isolation, or rather them trying to isolate you from your friends and family. I've often heard girlfriends of mine who, when they started dating someone, they would say, "Oh, Cindy, he's so great and he wants to be around me all the time, and he keeps saying he never wants to share my time and never wants to share my attention with anybody else. He just wants it to be just me and him." And every time I hear
but that, those should be good things, right?
well, see, it is very unhealthy to expect your partner to have all of their mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological stimulation from just you. Mm-hmm. That's not the way we're human beings, we're social creatures, right? We're not wired that way. Mm-hmm. And so every time I hear that, I think that's
a red flag for you.
That's a huge red flag, because on paper it sounds a little bit sweet and it sounds a little bit, endearing and nice, but no, like if you are in a healthy relationship, your partner would want you to have healthy relationships outside of them. Mm-hmm. He or she would want you to have, healthy friends, be in a healthy work environment, or, extracurricular things, just your own life outside of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you had these things going on before, how does all of a sudden now this person come into your life and everything gets shut down?
Right. Exactly.
So you had friendships, you had hobbies, you had activities that you were involved in.
Right.
So how does everything now cease to be?
Right. And anyone in a relationship with you who, asks for that or encourages that, huge toxic sign. Huge. Because if you think about it, the easiest way for a person to control you is to first isolate you from everybody else, because then you don't have that influence of someone saying to you, "Hey, you know what, this isn't healthy," or, trying to help you to open your eyes to see the situation that you're in. So when they can remove those influences, it's a lot easier at that point to control you and to manipulate you. And so, yeah, most abusers are isolators. Most of them are. And of course, they don't want anyone in your life to know what they're doing to you. So, yeah.
So you're saying they cut off access to you?
Well, yes and no. Well, the cutting off of the access will happen through the abused. Okay. You see what I'm saying? So let's say you and I are in a relationship and I am the toxic, abusive partner. Mm-hmm. I will try to isolate you from your friends and family. Now, mind you, you will be doing the isolation because you are the one that has the relationships that you're backing away from. But the encouragement will come from me.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that moves us to our next question, advice. As you as someone who, you have that experience, you're open about talking about your experience. And I applaud you for that. What advice would you offer to someone based on your experience? If they may suspect or, they have an understanding that they may be in a toxic relationship, how do you get yourself out of that relationship, out of that situation?
Well, first and foremost, you have to be willing to talk about what's happening with you. Healing and help never comes without breaking of silence. And it doesn't have to be done publicly. Not everyone will do what we do. It doesn't have to be done that way. But when you're in it, when you're in that sort of relationship, the first thing that individual needs to do is to get with some trusted people about what is happening to them. And they need to extricate themselves from that relationship as soon as possible. Now, I understand in many cases, it is a lot easier said than done. For example, if a woman is living with her abuser and he has, financial control, or he, earns the bulk of the house's income, right? Or they have children and she's not able to take care of herself and her children on her own without financial assistance. There's a lot of factors that go into why many women stay in these abusive relationships. And that's really where the community effort needs to be amped up. Like, we need to start implementing things in this country, like safe houses. And that's actually one of the things that Candy Gibson was agitating for when during the royal visit. And I applaud her for that, because that's something that we definitely need. We need that on every island in this country, for women and men. But we all know that women are primarily victims of domestic violence. Men are victims as well, but women more so than men. And so we need these shelters where persons can go and be safe and start the process of getting back on their feet, getting the counseling that they need. And so the primary act, first of all, is getting out of that relationship. And while not every abusive relationship is physical, it can escalate to that. It is not a big leap for someone who emotionally abuses you to escalate into abusing you physically. And so you never want to stay a second or a minute longer. And it's important to have support of family, of friends, anyone in your life who is willing to help you, who's willing to be there and kind of hold your hand and walk you through the process. but definitely talking about it, getting the help that you need to get out of that relationship, and then, you know, definitely therapy, because a lot of times, I know I struggled with this in my first marriage. A part of me didn't feel like I deserved any better, because I grew up in an abusive home. And so coming from, you know, a very abusive background as a child to being an adult and being married and in a abusive marriage, at that time, I didn't really feel like I was worthy of better. And so a lot of persons who are in these abusive relationships have abusive histories with family. And it becomes even more of a psychological battle, because that person may be struggling with self-esteem issues, self-loathing, and whatnot. And so they may just not believe that they deserve someone who will respect them and honor them, or that they simply believe, or they may not simply believe, that they just deserve to be by themselves and safe.
So can you say, because maybe that person never saw what a healthy relationship looked like, maybe that toxic relationship is something that I guess they're more familiar with, they're more comfortable with? Can you say that? I mean,
that can definitely be a factor. There's definitely a causal link between growing up in an abusive home and then remaining in an abusive relationship as an adult. There's a definite link there.
So what do you say to persons who say, you know, you just need to leave? Why don't you just get out? Just leave, you know?
What would I say to persons who say that?
Yeah, to make it, you know, seem as though it's so easy, because we talk about those factors that come into play, the financial, you know, some persons are in situations where they just can't pick up and leave, because where are they going to go?
Where are they going to go? Right. Yeah. They have children. Who's going to take care of their children? Yes. You know, it is very easy to bark should-haves, would-haves, could-haves at someone when you are not in their shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or if you're in their shoes, but you had the resources to leave, it's quite easy for you to then say, well, why didn't you just leave?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's also factoring in, especially with women who leave men who are physically abusive, you also have to factor in that many women are murdered after leaving abusive partners, like almost immediately after leaving. And so there is that personal safety issue. Now, I'm not saying that you should stay because of a fear of because of being hurt, but that fear is real, because
that's reality.
Right? Yeah, we've seen that. It happens in this country. We see it on the news.
Yeah,
you know. So that's a definite, which of course makes safe houses such a necessity in this country. It's a definite need, and that's something that, given the epidemic of domestic violence in this country, it's actually a shame that we don't have one safe house yet anywhere in this country. And it also speaks to the lack of care that the society puts on this issue, well, on women, really.
Well, that's why it's important for advocates and activists like you to raise the alarm, you know, bring this to the forefront, because these are the things that we need to help these vulnerable groups of individuals.
Yes.
We need these things. You said not one. There's not one.
There's not one. Wow. And then, you know, it's not just the women who are in danger. If these women have children, I mean, look at the last I think like 2 or 3 really severe, and when I say severe, I'm not dismissing anyone else's domestic violence situations, but I'm only really saying severe because it was spoken of a lot in the media as of recent, right? The last 2 recent really bad domestic violence situations where you had that one lady, of course, who was stabbed and beaten and run over, and that was captured on video. And then the other lady, the young lady, I think she was 20 or 21, who was murdered by her partner or former partner. And then about a year or 2 prior, you had a lady here in Grand Bahama who was stabbed to death by her boyfriend, right? In cases where these women have children, these children are victims as well. And these children are potential victims of violence. I mean, with, there's just that really heartbreaking case of that lady who was, stabbed and run over in Nassau. You remember, she had her baby, she was clutching her baby while, her partner was doing this to her. And so we have to remember that it's not just the women that are in danger, it's the children as well. And so that even more calls for the outcry for safe houses and domestic violence shelters. It's just so long overdue, Deidre. It's really, really long overdue.
Thank you for sharing that. Definitely agree. We do need these initiatives. We need them in place to assist these group of persons. If we're looking at making progress in our communities and making progress in our society, we need to help these groups. We need to help these individuals.
Yes.
Okay. We need to keep these individuals safe. So as we move along, as we recognize Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about rape culture. There's been a lot of talk about victim blaming. So what is your view of rape culture in our society and our tendency to blame victims who have been raped or sexually assaulted?
Well, let me start by saying that the Bahamas has a pervasive rape culture. For several years now, we have been number 1 per capita for rape in the region. And considering what a small country this is, that's incredibly frightening. But we have a culture, and not just here, obviously, not just this country, but this is the country that we live in. So this is the country that we're going to speak about. We are in a society that does not value women. We live in a very misogynistic and patriarchal society. We live in a society where women are taught from just early, very, very early young ages that they are beneath men, that they are to be subservient to men, that we are basically made for the advancement and the amusement of men, and that we are beneath them, that we are not as worthy as they are. And so that really breeds the ground for women to be constantly objectified, assaulted. There's this very sickening mindset of entitlement that so many, not all, but so many Bahamian men have, where they feel entitled to a woman's body, a woman's time, a woman's attention, none of which a woman has to give or is obligated to give them. And so there's that also breeds the ground for victim blaming. When a woman is sexually violated in this country, more often than not, that woman's life is going to be dissected. What was she wearing? What was she doing? Where was she at the time? Why did she go out so late? Why did she drink that? Why did she wear that? How many sexual partners has she had in her lifetime? None of which matters, all of which is completely irrelevant, because no is no, and it will always be no. But yet we always we dissect these women's lives because we make women who are sexually assaulted feel that they are responsible for what happened to them. We give women long laundry lists of things not to do so that they don't get raped, don't go out late at night, don't wear the short skirt, don't leave your drink unattended, don't go over to his house late, don't let him come over to your house late. Don't smile too much, don't laugh too much, don't look too friendly, don't
let him buy you a drink.
Right, walk with your keys like in between your fingers, you know, like this, carry mace, do this, do that. It's just this, but we don't tell men not to rape. Now, of course, that's not the only thing and men need to be told, right? Because from an early age, men, as they're boys, they are socialized to objectify women. So it starts in the home for sure. And so that's where all the victim blaming comes in. We're in a society, for example, where, like, I honestly, Deidre, I do not know a woman in this country who does not have to deal with catcalling. I don't know one. I deal with it every single day that I leave my house. I deal with catcalling. Like, literally now, when I go out, I have earplugs in, and I'm you know, using my mobile data to go on YouTube so that I don't have to hear what's being said to me, because it's sickening. It's absolutely
being said to you. You have to block it out.
Yeah, it's absolutely sickening, and it's offensive. And these men believe that they have the right to speak to you like that. And then when you ignore them, so many of
that's
them.
Another problem.
Exactly. And so often, us as women, I certainly have been there, you almost feel like you have to let them down easy so that they don't become violent with you. Like, I have had,
you have to do it in a nice way. You have to do it in a why you have to be so rude? Like, you have to do it in a nice way. Yeah.
Right. As if we owe them a nice letdown, which we don't. But it's that fear that if I, like, brush him off or tell him to go away, which you have every right to do, he will, you know, rear up and become violent. Like, I've had drinks thrown at me, I've had food thrown at me, I've been slapped, I've been shoved, like, all at rejecting a man's advances. And it's just, and what I do, given what I do, so many women, my inbox is sad. It is, because, like, so many women will message me and say, Cindy, you know, I just experienced this today. Like, this guy groped me today, or this guy, you know, sent me a really dirty email at work, or, you know, just constant, like, harassment different women experience in their everyday lives. And for the most part, men are completely removed from, in that they don't experience it themselves. I'm not saying that no man is harassed. Yes, you do have some men who experience harassment, but sexual harassment by and large is something that men are perpetrators of on us. And it's really, it's a huge, huge problem. And we have to get at where the mindset, we have to attack the mindset. We have to talk where the mindset comes from.
Absolutely. It begins, as you have mentioned, it begins with the mindset and changing the way how we think and how we view women in our communities.
Education is important. We have to educate. And then we have to get rid of a lot of what we have been educated, because not all education is good education. So we have to uproot a lot of the things that we have been taught to believe and spoon-fed, and replace that with what's right and decent and good and fair, you know, and respectable and all that.
Absolutely. It's so very important that you mentioned that if we're seeking to make progress as a society, these are the issues that we need to address. We need to address these things within our culture.
Yeah.
Why is it that? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying
go ahead.
We have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Like, this can't be like a one-time, two-time conversation. No, it has to keep going. It has to keep going, because the issue, the epidemic is ongoing. Yeah. So the conversation can't stop.
No, it can't stop.
Right.
It can't. Yeah. Not at all. We have to continue to, and, you know, sometimes people say, you know, it's just talk. But no, it's not just talk, because talking leads to action. So we need to bring these things we need to bring these issues to the forefront. We need to talk about these things. If we're seeking to make progress as a society, and we're talking about all these developments that we're making, we're doing this, we're doing that, we had this accomplishment, we made that accomplishment, and we still back 50 years in how we treat our women and how we treat our girls in our society, we're not really making progress.
Right.
We're not. So we have to address these things.
Exactly.
So I want to go to another point as we talk about victim blaming. We talk about this rape culture. Recommendations to address these issues in our community. I know you mentioned one, changing the mindset, but is there anything else you'd like to recommend in response to rape culture, victim blaming, and toxic relationship? What advice or what recommendation would you like to bring forward?
Well, there are a few. I know of a few activists that go into the schools and that speak to our children. That's extremely important. That's something that I am now working on getting into. And it's important for us to purify the minds of our children, because they're our future. And it's the children that grow up to become adults that, you know, perpetrate violence. And so we have to get at the root, and we have to be willing to talk to our children. That's one, getting into the schools. Getting into the churches, that's a big one.
Okay, I see you at a moment. I see you at a moment. That was what's going on.
That's a big one. And the reason why that is a big one is because the church is one of the biggest offenders. And Deidre, I see your face.
No, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
It is. My whole, and I am not unique to this, my entire Christian upbringing, from the time that I was a child until I was in my early 30s, maybe, I was always taught to believe that my worth is attached to simply being able to be married and have babies and sexually satisfy my husband.
Wow.
Women are not empowered in the church. They are not. And the men are massively so. Women are not.
But can we speak for all of them? Can we speak for all of these?
So, okay, let me give you an example. And looking back on this, I feel like I'm going to owe my daughter an apology for years to come. A few years ago, my husband and I, we enrolled our daughter into like a girls' workshop kind of thing, right? And it was church-based. Oh my gosh. I'm actually ashamed now to talk about this. Honestly, I am. The whole, it was like a 6 or 7 week program. And at the end of the program, there was this like huge ball, right? And each week, like the entire thing, it was literally all about domesticating girls. It was nothing about entrepreneurship, education. It was all about like literally teaching girls how to be godly homemakers, wives, and mothers. Like that's it. And here's the thing. I wouldn't, like looking back, I cringe thinking about that. But looking back, I wouldn't have had much of an issue with it if they were taught these things so that they could be self-sufficient and not have to depend on a man for anything. But no, they were taught that solely so that they could get married and have babies, because that's what we're supposed to do. And that's just one like aspect of how women and girls are not empowered in the church. And given that we are in a Christian society, man, the church has some serious blood on their hands. It really does. And you have just so many church leaders, male church leaders, who are rapists and sex offenders and domestic abusers, and they are coddled and protected by members in the church who know exactly what they're doing, and these church members lie for them, and they cover for them, and they blame their victims. So yeah, the church has massive blood on their hands in this issue, and I have no qualms about dragging the church on this issue. I have no qualms about calling the church out on this issue, because if I had to call out an institution in this country that is like the biggest offender, it's the church. And it is the church, point blank. It is. Definitely.
I want us to be mindful that I get what you're saying.
Yes,
you know, that's a huge issue. So that's a huge issue to unpack. But I don't want us to cast a blanket over the whole, you know, the whole system.
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that every single, you know, church leader is abusive and a misogynist and, you know, violent. No. You do have your good.
Yeah.
Here's the problem though. They're quiet. Where are they? You don't see them, Deidre. They're nowhere. They are massively quiet. And so that's a problem, because they're not calling out and exposing the problem and the issues within their own institution. And so, in my opinion, you may not be a perpetrator of it, but if you're not exposing it, you're just, and if you know it's happening and you're not exposing it, I would have said that you're just as bad, but no, you're worse, because you see it, but you choose to say, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to lose members. I don't want to lose ties. I don't want to lose this and that. And so what people are dying at the hands of what's going on in a lot of your assemblies, and you want to save face, that's a problem. And I'm going to call that problem out every time I see it.
Or is it that they do speak, but they're not maybe given the exposure? Can we say that in some instances?
See, okay. Is that a possibility? Yes. I would definitely wouldn't say that it's not a possibility, but here's the thing, Deidre. Church leaders, they know how to find Facebook, right? They know how to go on a live video when they are, God, I was just gonna say something.
I don't want us to go down this rabbit hole.
Oh yeah, you know. Well, okay, just one thing. So they know how to go and make a live video if they want to drag another pastor.
Oh my gosh.
If they are involved in some sort of dispute, If they're trying to sell you something, if they're trying to, preach the prosperity gospel, if you're going to get 1 million cars and houses and land and all that, like they know how to go on a live video and do that. So if they could go on a live video and do that, they could go on a live video and they could speak out against gender-based violence. They could go on a live video and they could speak out against child molestation. They could go on a live video and they could speak out against domestic violence and sexual harassment and all that, and rape culture. They can do it. So I can't even give them a pass on that, because like that nice live button on their social media, yeah, they know how to click that. They do. They be finding that.
Okay. But there are instances.
You and I will talk about that more.
Yeah, that's
outside of this live.
Ooh, that's a deep one right there.
Yeah,
that's a deep one. But I just want us to be fair and balanced. I want us to be fair and balanced. We won't want to put everybody in one.
Right?
One
no.
But there are offenders, and there are leaders who do take advantage of their position, and that's definitely wrong. Yeah. That's definitely wrong. You do have, I saw a recent, just one recently, with a pastor who was counseling a young lady, and now during her parents' situation, and now he's getting married to her. So you do have those offenses, and it really makes you think. It really makes you think. Yeah. Okay, but I don't want us to cast everyone under that umbrella. Right. But getting back to our recommendations, we talk about changing our mindset. We want to make progress as a society. So firstly, we need to change our mindset. Are there any other recommendations that you would like to put forward?
Yeah. So other than the schools and other than the churches, of course, these types of discussions also need to be happening in your civic organizations as well. And just having a lot more community outreach on this issue, having activists come together and join up to have, that community outreach and education days, so to speak. Like, for example, if it's a similar to town hall meetings, but specifically for education on that issue. Okay. The formation of peer groups, like of survivors, who can come together and support each other and speak about their experiences and just kind of strengthen each other from day to day. That's also a very good community initiative as well. And definitely more social media education, targeting social media in that way, specifically on this issue of gender-based violence, like what you do, like what I do with a lot of other persons who are known on social media and have good followings on social media. So yeah, those are ways that those of us who do what we do can continually target our communities and keep this issue in the forefront.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We move to our next question. Mm-hmm. And as we wind down, is there any other additional comments that you would like to add? I'm sorry, let me get back to efforts. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Efforts to address these issues in our country, whether it pertains to toxic relationships, sexual assault, rape culture. What do you think about the efforts made as we consider the legal response, not just legal, but even the response in general? Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied? Should more be done to address these issues?
Well, no, of course I'm not satisfied, because when you have a minister of national security saying that a man who is guilty of unlawful sexual intercourse got too harsh a sentence by being sentenced to prison for 4 years, there will be a trickle down in the system of not taking this issue seriously enough. And while those comments were infuriating, they were not at all surprising, because that is the culture that we're in. And in addition to that, you had the comments a few days prior by the acting deputy director of public prosecution that he later clarified. But they're all under that umbrella of the rape culture, where this 14-year-old victim, because that's exactly what she was now sharing blame with her abuser. That's sickening. And so when you have persons who are supposed to uphold the law and enforce the law, having that mindset, what do you expect is going to happen to the persons, below them, their subordinates? And then just kind of trickling down into the larger society. So there is not enough community help yet, because there's not enough outrage yet. There is not enough outrage placed where it should be placed yet. Let me say that, because a lot of times we become more outraged with the victim. Oh, these little girls are so fast and they're becoming women before their time. Like, you probably heard that a million times. I've heard that a million times. And every single time one of these cases happens, so many people come up with that ridiculous, asinine comment.
Yeah, you see it all the time. You see it all the time with the missing girls flyers, and there's always some comment under the flyers. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so when that is the pervasive mindset, you're not going to have sufficient help, because we are still not properly identifying the problem yet. We're still working on identifying the source of the problem, and it's not these children, it's the adults that prey on them. So again, it's a chipping away at the mindset. And of course, in the meantime, those of us who have it right and who are placing the blame where it should be, we are the agitators who are, beating the streets, so to speak, and lobbying to get the community help that's needed for these victims. They need it. They shouldn't just be able to just fall through the cracks of the system and get no help. Like, that poor girl probably yet doesn't even really know and realize the damage that has been done to her yet. And so many girls just like her, but
there's so many things that we have to address. We need to address the legal age of consent. I mean, it's just so many factors involved here. Yeah. When we talk about consenting to sex, we have to also consider the fact, we have to talk about the science. We talk about the fact that we believe in the science, we trust the science, but science says that your cognitive reasoning, your brain, your thinking, your decision-making skill isn't formed until you reach somewhere between the age of 18 and 21. So consenting to sex requires that you need to be able to make those type of decisions. And I'm sure your brain is not fully aware of those decision-making skills at 14, 15, 16.
Yeah, no, I do.
At 16 to consent to sex.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think the age of consent to sex in this country is too low. I personally think
science says that our decision making is not evolved at that level. Definitely not at 16.
Think about it. A 16-year-old can't even drive you can't even get a license. You can't even drive a car.
You can't drink.
Right. You can't legally drink. You can't drive a car without a permit and without a license.
So drinking isn't good for you, but you're able to. Drinking is bad for you. You can't drink at 16, but you can co-sign to sex.
Right. Okay. Yeah. The legal age of consent should definitely be raised. I always thought 16 was too low. And if I am not mistaken, don't quote me on this, at one point, like way back in the day, I think it was 14 at one point, and then it was changed to 16, if I'm not mistaken. But for the longest time, from what I can remember, it's been 16, and I just always thought that's just too young. That's ridiculous. 16. I think it should be 18, and that's another thing
that is another issue for another day. But how are we ever going to make progress as a society when we have all of these issues we have all of these issues to come back, all of these issues to deal with, even with the marital rape situation? We have all of these issues to unpack. Yeah,
and that speaks to just another issue of so many people in this country believing that it's impossible for a husband to rape his wife. It's, we've been beating this issue to death. Those of us who do not believe that women are cattle, we've been beating this issue to death. And and we still need to continue to beat it to death. Like we can't just we can't give up on fighting for the amendment. Doesn't even need to be a new law. It just needs, just need to take out the clause in that's already existing that says rape is defined as two persons who are unmarried. Like that is the only thing that needs to change, and then there's no more issue, right? But no more issue in terms of legality, I mean. But yeah, no, we have that conversation can't die either. It can't. No, you don't become property the moment you say I do. Women are looked at as property, men aren't. And of course, neither is property. And you don't become you're not owned. You don't become owned the moment you become a wife. So we definitely have to keep at that issue too, for sure.
Definitely. There's a lot to uncover. So as we wind down, are there any additional comments that you would like to
add? Just thanking you for this. It's important. And it's important for persons like yourself, persons like myself, and so many others out there that are a part of this fight to continue. There are days I get very discouraged living in this country. And then when I got the call from you inviting me to be, wait, did I call you or did you call me? I can't even remember how it happened, but in conversing with you, it gives me hope. It gives me the ability it gives me another avenue to keep the conversation going. So I want to say, I salute you and thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure having you talk about these issues. As I would have mentioned, we're not really open as a community yet to really talk about these things. We kind of sweep these things under the rug. There's so many issues, from rape culture to victim blaming to incest. It's just a whole scope of issues in our community that we cover up, we sweep under the rug. And it takes brave persons like yourself to say, I've been through this. I've faced the situation. I've had these type of traumas in my life, but I came out of them. And so I wanna talk about them. And when you have brave persons like yourself who come forward, you have people who want to then, like you said, just dissect your life, attack you. And so that's why it's so scary sometimes, even for me, to want to come forward and talk about certain things, because you then have some persons who come behind and they want to attack you.
Yeah.
Just for coming forward and just being brave enough to
Right.
want to talk about these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll never make progress as a society if we don't air out our dirty laundry. If we don't talk about these things, we'll never be able to move forward.
Yeah. We have to be willing to have the uncomfortable conversations.
We have to.
Yeah.
We have to, because that is what's going to lead us to take action.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
We need to strategize. We need to figure out how are we going to address these issues? How are we going to tackle the fact that we have these laws on the books? Are they archaic? I mean, where are we living? We're living in a progress. Are we living in a progressive society, or are we living in ancient times? How are we living?
Yeah. Right. Yes. And yes, many of laws are archaic. Yes.
We need to think about these things.
And don't protect women.
Don't protect other vulnerable groups as well.
Right. Yes. Very true. Very, very true. Yes.
Our vulnerable community is people who cannot speak for themselves. Yeah. Who's going to speak for them? So it takes, again, brave persons like yourself to come forward and talk about these things. And then you're going to have those persons who attack you, who try to tear you down.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm used to it. I'm used to it.
You shouldn't have to get used to it. That's the problem. Right. You shouldn't have to get used to that. That is not the culture that we want to promote.
Right. I agree. But you know that saying that well-behaved women seldom make history. So
again,
yeah, I'm not about trying to fit in or
say that again.
I'm not about trying to fit in or appease, society or live up to the status quo. I'm trying to do away with the status quo in this country. And when you do that, you're not going to always be liked, but that's okay. I don't do this to be liked. If I wanted to be liked, I would not be doing this work. That's for sure. So no, it's about right, making the wrongs in this society right. I want my daughters to live in a society where they are respected, where they are not seen as an object to use and abuse. I don't want my daughters growing up experiencing the catcalling and the sexual harassment. I mean, like, that's not going to be done away with in my generation. I already know that, right? But I want us to be able to make enough of a dent and raising strong enough daughters who will continue this conversation. And I want them in a safe society. I want them in a society where their voice matters and where they are not going to be looked at as less than simply because they have a vagina. That is not the society I want my daughters to be in. So yeah, no, I'm gonna keep doing this for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us today, spending your time with us today. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you're a friend now. You're a friend. So we're going to call on you.
Yes.
We're going to call on you and we're going to continue to talk about these issues. So we're friends, okay?
Yes, of course. Of course.
So I would like to thank our guests, our viewers for listening to our talk. I would like to thank our wonderful, lovely guest, Miss Cindy Godet. Thank you. Oh, you want to share a page, Miss Godet?
I'm sorry?
You want to share your page or anything?
Yes. My support group page is Silent No More Bahamas on Facebook.
Okay, could you share the link under this video? Would you mind sharing the link?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. I would like to thank our viewers for listening and like our page for future notifications of upcoming talks. Comment under this video. Let us know your thoughts and let us know what you want us to talk about. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Can We Talk? Follow us on Instagram, Twitter using the addresses provided on our page. And remember, let's Think, talk, and do. Thank you. Have a great day.